So this is Kai Hostetter-Habib, and I am interviewing Josh Merrow on the topic of HIV/AIDS as part of my Riverdale Senior Project. The interview took place on May 11th at Riverdale Country School located in the Bronx. This interview was recorded using an iPhone. So just as an opening question, tell me about yourself, who you are, your job, what you like to do for fun, and any social identifiers you would like to share with me.
My name's, am I talking to you or the camera?
Either were.
Okay, my name's Josh Merrow. I'm an art teacher. I run the Maker program here at Riverdale. For fun, I like to make stuff, actually. Social identifiers, I'm pretty much mostly straight. He, him, his. I guess that's about it.
Okay, great. So then, what was your childhood like before 1981?
Well, I was born in 1968, so my childhood, I guess I was mostly growing up in Washington, D.C., in kind of a tough neighborhood. So it was, what was my childhood like? I don't know how to describe it. I went to a bilingual school where most of the kids spoke Spanish. So I learned to speak Spanish early on, which was great.
Cool. So then, what were you doing during between the years of like 1981 to 1995?
1981, I would have been in junior high school, middle school. 1995, 1995, I was actually working with a group called CALPEP in Oakland, California, basically giving health advice and screenings and counseling to sex workers, street sex workers. So that was just a mind-blowing job. It really opened my eyes to, whole different societies that we have in this mixture of societies that we live in. Yeah, that's what I was up to. And before this, you mentioned that you were working in San Francisco in public health during. Right. So the organization was based in Oakland. It was started and run by a bunch of former sex workers. And I just happened upon the job randomly. So, yes, we were in San Francisco as well. And there were people on staff who were positive, HIV positive, and a lot of the clients too.
So do you remember what your first memory is of hearing about AIDS?
Sure, that would have been in high school, I guess. And it was kind of like the way the pandemic started here. Nobody really knew anything. There was a lot of fear. Remember the stage where everyone was spraying Clorox on their vegetables? It was kind of like that. Like, ooh, what can I do? What can I not do? And then a lot of anger that the government, Reagan, was just ignoring it. Reagan didn't pay any attention until Rock Hudson died, and even then, a fellow actor, even then he kind of ignored it, and the religious right was saying it was a punishment for homosexuality. So it was a weird time. And then in San Francisco, later in the 90s, there were yard sales all the time for people selling deceased victims' things.
Thank you. And could you speak more about how you felt about the Reagan administration early on in the epidemic?
Well, the Reagan administration, to me, was just kind of a disaster. They closed all the mental hospitals, so suddenly there were homeless people everywhere. There weren't really homeless people in the United States before that. I mean, there were during the Depression and probably other times, but it wasn't, at least I grew up in sort of, where I grew up in D.C., it's now called Adams Morgan. It's kind of a trendy neighborhood, but it wasn't then. But you still didn't see homeless people. I think there were shelters and there was a government mental health system that, I don't know how good it was, but it did take people off the street. So I'm getting off track. I didn't like the Reagan administration very much.
So how did you get involved in public health?
It was just random. I had gotten out of college, wondering what to do, and a friend of mine was working there, and she said, "Come down and interview." And it just was fascinating, partially because the nature of the organization. It was there were only a couple of white people, and that was kind of a new, well, not a new experience. My junior high school was like that too, but it's just eye-opening. So if you've grown up middle-class, white, straight male, it's possible to just not see so much. It's sort of organized so you don't have to see anything. And this just felt like, okay, I'm seeing some new things, and so I decided to work there, and they hired me.
Could you describe some of the things that you saw at this company that you worked at?
It was a nonprofit. Eye-opening things that I saw, well, people who were openly HIV positive, people who were trying to kick IV drugs, people of mixed genders or changing genders. That was also a new one for me. And it was like my coworkers. We would hang out, and it was just, I learned a lot. And it made me realize that although from the outside, or maybe from certain angles, it seems like there's one culture here, there's not. There are tons. And I guess speaking Spanish sort of helped ease into other terrain, you know. Yeah, interesting place to work.
So could you describe part of how you felt knowing all of these different types of people, and perhaps the ignorance or the confusion that society felt surrounding the AIDS epidemic?
Sure, because white people who weren't exposed to any of this kind of could ignore it. And it was hard to ignore once you find out what's going on. And that was, San Francisco, the Bay Area, was also sort of the leading edge of activism and just kind of awareness, because it has a big gay population. That was new to me too, being around a lot of gay people and having lots of fun. I mean, there's something about meeting people and taking away the fear that you might have gotten from just the media or your parents or whatever, and having a blast, actually.
So could you talk more about this fear that you may have initially felt coming from Washington, D.C. in junior year of high school, when you first heard about AIDS to California?
Well, let's see. I ended up going to college at Berkeley, so that was later. Junior high, it was sort of like the initial stages of the pandemic. A lot of questions, a lot of fear, and there weren't a lot of openly gay figures then. So, I mean, my neighbors were gay. There's a gay couple living next to us. And from when I was a little kid, my parents would let me go over there and hang out with them. So I was in the kind of that dangerous zone of thinking you have no biases, but you can't see them, of course, otherwise. But I felt like I was on a good road. But of course, there were tons of things I didn't know. I didn't hear about anyone actually getting sick in junior high school. I don't know when probably out in San Francisco, when I started waking up to what was going on.
What was this like waking up, as you said? What did it feel like to you?
It's sort of like discovering another planet, actually. And it felt, there's kind of the wow factor, like, my God, I didn't know about this. And I don't mean just HIV, but again, other cultures within the US. There's the wow, and there's the interest, there's some fear, and then there's some shame, really, or just embarrassment that I was kind of like on the clueless side of things. Yeah, I'll go with that.
So, do you remember when society started to shift away from complete ignorance and started to become more aware of the AIDS epidemic?
ACT UP had a lot to do with it. They were doing just phenomenally media-savvy actions. And I don't know that I can remember particular ones, but they were getting in the media, and the drumbeat was slowly getting louder that this doesn't just affect homosexuals who deserve it. I guess straight people started getting it. That's probably what happened. But there was really impressive activism and really savvy activism going on. And total silence from the government. I'm not sure when that changed. Probably after Reagan.
I think Reagan first gave his first speech on AIDS in 1987, which was 6 years after the AIDS epidemic began. And then Bush took office in, I think, 89.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was Bush's father.
Yeah.
How
Bush,
did he do?
He did implement more programs, but that may have also been because of a Democratic Congress. So it switched from Republican to Democratic. But I think his platform was like compassionate conservatism. So he's trying to like edge the harshness of Reagan. But going back to like ACT UP and whatnot, you talked about you mentioned how the media almost portrayed gay people as like deserving this disease. So I was wondering if you could talk more about like attitudes that the media had before ACT UP and before like 1986 versus afterwards.
Well, one huge difference between then and now is that gay culture and gay people they're everywhere in the media, in movies, music. I think if I recall correctly, the first openly gay actor, or the first gay character on mainstream TV, was on a program called Soap. And it was, what's his name? The When Harry Met Sally guy, a comedian.
Yeah, I know. I don't know his name, but I know.
You know what I'm talking
yeah.
about? But that was on at 11:30 at night. But that started the ball rolling in Hollywood. Like it was suddenly started to be okay, and on TV. And I think that's really how things are shaped in this country, through media and television. So I'm trying to think, were there any, certainly in high school, there were some students who in retrospect were queer in some way or another, but there wasn't like a union of them, or an organization or a student voice that I can recall. Now at Berkeley, at university, that was changing fast. That university has always had a sort of progressive feel to it. And so there was the LGBTQ, I don't know if they called it that then, student groups and protests about AIDS. And it was a lot more in your face, which is a good thing.
So in junior high and high school, did people have conversations about AIDS, or was it more like hush-hush?
People meaning like me and my friends?
Yeah, you and your friends.
It was something remote. You talked about it, like, but it wasn't something that felt real in the sense that you knew. I didn't know anyone with HIV. Well, maybe I did, but I wasn't aware of that. So it wasn't like the pandemic, which was getting everyone, and everyone was really freaked out. It was getting, at the beginning, it was getting the homosexual population and then IV drug users. And I felt kind of far away from that. And I think you take that and add the silence in the media, it's pretty easy to kind of, you read about it a little bit in the newspaper, but it wasn't like today.
So then working with people who were HIV positive and people who were trying to like stop IV drugs and whatnot at this company you worked at, how did that really like change your perception, and how did that like almost open your eyes to this problem? And I know it's sort of like a similar question I asked before, but.
Well, we did needle exchange and taught people how to bleach their needles if they had to reuse them. Gave out condoms. Got people to. We did HIV testing on an RV. I wasn't a trained phlebotomist, so I wasn't allowed to do the testing, take people's blood, but I did everything else. And we would go at night, walk along the strolls where the prostitutes worked, the sex workers worked, and give them these materials and talk about different STDs, and also with their clients. So, as a rule, almost everyone was really appreciative. I mean, so it was a job that I felt like I was learning a lot and also helping a little bit. So how did it change my attitudes? Well, having an HIV positive coworker, like that's, you're together a lot and you get to ask them and you develop trust. And it wasn't something that killed you immediately, and now much less so, obviously. How that awareness changed me, I definitely did. I like to think for the better, but I'm not sure how to identify it.
That's totally okay. And then, could you talk more about like walking down the streets where prostitutes mostly like were, and talking with them and educating them on STDs?
We had like a card deck of different STD symptoms: gonorrhea, syphilis, trick. There are a few others, and then HIV. And what was the question?
What was the experience like for you or for the people on the streets where prostitutes mostly were located?
Well, the sex workers were appreciative of just like, we're on your team. I was never paired. Well, I think I was the only white person in that. We were going places where you wouldn't want to have two white people walking up to prostitutes and talking. So I was always paired with somebody of color. And just about everybody was from those neighborhoods, so they knew. I guess it was eye-opening. In the beginning, it was a little scary. I was like, I wouldn't really walk around this part of Oakland at night by myself, but it was made it safe. So I got to see a lot of things ordinarily I wouldn't get to see. And I guess it just blew my mind, really, because you have a lot of people who had never left a 6 or 8 block radius. Like San Francisco is right there, you can see it, and they've never been. People who seem so constrained by their environment, and this was their safe space, this neighborhood. And that was just utterly foreign to me. So it was a great job. I think I did it for 4 years, 4 years.
Great. And then I know I want to be cognizant of your time, so just a couple final questions. I know I've been asking a bunch of questions, but I just want to give you a moment to really tell me your story and how AIDS impacted you.
Well, it impacted people around me. I remember I got to be good friends with one of my coworkers who was positive, and I lost touch with them after I left the job because I moved to Guatemala and lost touch with a lot of people. But that was really sad because he knew he had. There were no medicines at the time, I don't think. Just there were crazy, like crackpot, expensive treatments that didn't do anything. And it's kind of tragic. So that was how it affected me: sadness and anger and feeling lucky for so many things. And a little bit of, it was depressing as hell, actually. And seeing the yard sales, it was just this kind of ongoing thing, and it was really heavy, actually. And I didn't even have it, I had a few friends, coworkers, and then the clients, the IV drug users. I guess I go with that.
Great. So, as the last question, is there anything you would like to tell yourself, your past self, looking back on the AIDS epidemic, or to tell yourself or anyone else you knew?
I know what I would tell myself. I would say, just because you had this job and met these people doesn't mean you're done. Because I sort of thought, well, I'm enlightened, and I did all these great things, and therefore I'm not part of the problem. It's easy to let yourself off the hook. And I would tell myself not to do that, I think. Try to keep my eyes open.
Great. So before this interview wraps up, is there anything else you would like to say, either that I didn't ask you or that you didn't have a chance to say before?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.